The Minnesota Vikings had their 2024 season end with a brutal loss to the Los Angeles Rams, and one major factor was the catalyst to everything. The Minnesota Vikings lost in the wild card round to the Los Angeles Rams, and they lost 4 games this year, with 2 of them to the Detroit Lions and 2 to the Los Angeles Rams. Against everybody else, 14-0. Talk about that kind of luck. Not exactly great when it comes to the end of the season, having 2 consecutive games be losses that were also 2 consecutive losses earlier in the year. You can't make it up. That's just the life of being a Vikings fan. But it was a brutal loss from a lot of perspectives. The play calling was rough. The game plans weren't great. The adjustments just did not show up. But it was one aspect that really hit home when it came to this loss. That was the talent gap. The Vikings just have too many voids of talent on this roster to truly make an elite run. Everything's got to be perfect. And they face a young defense that's relatively inexpensive, and they're fast and powerful. And you saw that front four wreak havoc on Sam Darnold and that offensive line all night long. They tied an NFL record with 9 sacks, and Sam Darnold had the most sack yards with 82. 82 yards lost due to sacks. Think about that. It's bonkers. And one of the reasons why, talent gap. Now, going into the year, they knew that they were going to have to take some risks and have some positions that they just did not invest a lot in. They're going to have to win on those margins. They chose the interior offensive line. They gave Blake Brandel a 3-year, $9.5 million contract, rode with Ed Ingram, who was a second-round pick in 2022, Garrett Bradbury with a $5.25 million average annual value contract, and Dalton Reiser on the bench with a maximum of $2.4 million. They chose to moneyball the interior of the offensive line because they had to. Why? They ended up with $72 million in dead salary cap. When you're doing a competitive rebuild, you have to try to win some on the margins. And early on, it looked great. And then Christian Darrisaw got hurt, and everything was based around that. Not having Christian Darrisaw, Blake Brandel's performance dipped considerably. And that means Garrett Bradbury struggled. And then Ed Ingram's struggles led to Dalton Reiser, and he wasn't very much better. Brian O'Neill had a great year, but you can only expect so much from him. And he got bullied around, and it looked like he left the game with a concussion in the third quarter. There's just too many talent voids. The running back position, Aaron Jones is a great 1B. You don't have a 1A, and you don't have a 1C. Cam Akers was fine, but he's more of your third guy. They need a guy in that backfield. That ended up costing them in a major way. On defense, their corners. They don't have any youth at corner. Byron Murphy Jr. is 26. He's been in the league 6 years for some odd reason, and he's been good. But then you have a 34-year-old Stephon Gilmore and a 30-year-old Shaquille Griffin. Both of those guys have flaws. You can't play man coverage. You can't ask them to cross the field. And you end up playing a lot of zone, and then you just get picked apart by it by the Lions and Rams. That's because of a talent gap. You don't have the dudes to do what Brian Flores wants, and you need to get those guys. Once you get those guys, things can happen. Things can manifest themselves, and you can find a way to make things better. The biggest talent gap is up front. They don't have anybody that can get pressure on the inside without running a NASCAR package. And Pat Jones II being out the last 2 games really did hurt, because he does a lot of the dirty work to spring guys free, like Andrew Van Ginkel, Dallas Turner, and Jonathan Grenard. You need a dude up front that can rush the passer and be solid in run defense. And guess what? There are some guys in this upcoming class that can do that, but you have to find them. You have to find somebody to be able to get pressure up the middle. If you don't, well, it's a lot easier to be able to block guys like Jonathan Grenard and Andrew Van Ginkel. Plus, you can't run these 5-man stunts all the time and just expect them to get home. It didn't work against the Lions. It didn't work against the Rams. And it didn't work against other teams too. You have to find a way to get quicker pressure. The quickest way to the quarterback is straight ahead. Get pressure up the middle. Move the pocket back into the quarterback's face. Guys like Walter Nolan, Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, they can do those things. You need to find a way to fix that. You need to find a way to bulk up both trenches. They're going to have over $70 million to do that, and they're going to be able to. But it was the talent gaps across the board that cost the Minnesota Vikings this playoff game. Pair that with some bad coaching and Sam Darnold just not being able to overcome like he did all year, considering he threw for 377 yards and 3 touchdowns and dominated the Green Bay Packers, to what happened the next 2 games. It's the most stark transition I've ever seen in my life. It's wild how different that he was over the last 2 weeks. But it wasn't all him. There were a lot of factors that contributed to his play. And they need to fix those factors, whether or not Darnold stays or not. And that's a whole nother discussion. I'm Tyler Forness with DZ Sports. Skol Vikings.